Good afternoon, everybody. I just thought, my name is David Tunnicliffe. I'm the Commercial Director of GL Events UK. Before we start the session, I just wanted to explain why GL felt it important to sponsor this stage. GL Events has, for those who don't know GL Events, we're predominantly known for temporary structures and seating and overlay delivery, mainly the outdoor events industry in the UK. We're a global business, but in the UK we're mainly known as overlay, seating and temporary structures. With accreditations that we've got our ISO 20121 for sustainable management. We've got our ISO 14001 for environmental management. We've got a car policy for electric cars. We've provided the infrastructure of our business units to charge those cars. We're spending over £150,000 on solar panels on our roof to reduce our dependency on non-carbon electricity generation. We've got a company in to split up all our waste, so we have different waste segments from timber to plastic, goodness knows what, and we do have quite a lot of waste. We've actually reduced our power usage in simple ways, one by the way we clean and dry our products, and the other by how we actually back up our IT solutions. All these things are wonderful, and we did create a road to zero, and we've got a sustainability plan. All these things are wonderful, but to get our own carbon footprint down as a business. But when clients ring me up, or when Silverstone ring me up, or Ascot ring me up and say, what is a carbon footprint for my project? I can't answer that question because we've not got the tools to deliver the data and information that our stakeholders in major events want to give them that information. So I thought it was quite an interesting topic if we had suppliers and end users and venues in the room to work out how we can work together to not only reduce carbon footprint but also monitor, record, react and reduce. So I'm going to hand over to David. David Humphreys I met at an ESL event, and I thought he was a very switched on cookie, much more switched on than me because I am not a sustainable expert in any way, shape or form. I'm very much commercial. So David's going to run the session, and I think everyone else is going to introduce themselves from what David says.
Okay, thank you, David. And we are hearing okay, yeah? Can you hear me? Okay, good stuff. So, a brief introduction to myself. Thank you all for joining us. David Humphreys, Green Circle Solutions. But I started life as a civil engineer, but then I've spent the last 25 years in exhibitions and events, very much on the operational delivery side. So, I work with GES. I'm sure some of you are familiar with GES. Still not hearing?
Can we have headsets?
Testing. Oh, yes, that seems to be better. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Do you want to check your microphones quickly? 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, we're on. So, briefly, introduction. Very much operational background myself, delivering exhibitions and events, very much sort of coordinating supply chains, and I've been fortunate enough to work on a lot of the aerospace and defence shows, so I've travelled the world extensively. My carbon footprint is horrendous, but during the lockdown I put some time to engage in sustainability a bit more. Always been a passion, but I'm sure like most of you the day job gets in the way. So I got myself qualified and I'm a member of IEMA, the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, and came out of the pandemic having set up Green Circle Solutions. So very closely aligned with exhibitions and events still, work very closely with ESL, the supply chain services body. As you can see, we've got an A-list panel with us today, and talking about the wider subject, what role does the supply chain play in sustainability roadmaps and sustainability momentum generally. Now, although we've got some clients, or organisers, venues, effectively, different roles within the panel, not forget the fact that every single one of us is a supplier at some stage in the supply chain. We've all got suppliers feeding up to us, and we've all got end user clients. So before the panel introduce themselves, audience, you're not going to get away with it. I'm not going to get you to introduce yourselves individually, but I know we've got Slido, but we're going to use a good old-fashioned show of hands to start with, just to see where we sit and set a bit of context. So, first question. Who is attending Event Sustainability Live today? Okay, it's not a trick question, it's a test question. Okay, I think we've got everybody. Who has got a health and safety policy, so your businesses that you're aware of? Everybody again, good. Who has got a sustainability policy that you're aware of as a business? I think probably 90-95%. Whose business has done a carbon footprint analysis? Okay, a much lower show of hands, okay. And then finally, final question, who has actually got a roadmap to net zero? Okay, interesting. So again, for everybody here, that sort of sets a bit of a context and sort of a bit of a framework around the context of the discussion. Final one, who would say they're from the supply side? Okay, venues? Okay, and have we got anybody from the client side? Exhibition organisers? Have we got anybody who's an exhibitor? Okay, they don't tend to come to shows like this, do they? Okay, so interesting, just to gauge that. So moving on to our panel, I'll get you guys just to do a brief introduction of yourselves, your businesses, but just tell us, to start with as a bit of an overview, what does sustainability roadmap to net zero mean to you? And in your businesses, how is that manifesting itself? So start with you, Stefan.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stéphane Bazier. I'm the head of business sustainability and partnership at Silverstone. Silverstone, the racetrack, that I'm sure that you've heard about it before. We organize in many events, but one of them is the Formula One British Grand Prix, which has this year a record attendance of 480,000 people over 4 days, so almost 500,000 people. You can imagine the impact that that has. So going back to your questions, do we have a roadmap to net zero? We do, and why we do? Because F1 has announced in 2019 to be net zero by 2030. So that's probably when everything starts shaking within the organization, when we said, oh my God, what is carbon footprint? What is net zero? In 2019, at that time, nobody was really leading on sustainability at Silverstone. So I've been given that mission to lead that transformation from 2021. So we've been shifting to zero at Silverstone since the last 2 years, and we've been doing sustainability policies, starting measuring our carbon footprint and trying to support as much as we can F1 and other clients, other event organizers to get to net zero. So it's a journey that we've started only 2 years ago. There is still a long way to go. We haven't announced yet when us as an organization, we will be net zero, because before we do that, we need to make sure that we know, obviously, how much we're contributing and then putting together that road to zero.
Okay, cool, thank you. Andy?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Andy King. I'm the Group Technical and Sustainability Director for the Wernick Group. Wernick Group is a modular building company. We've been around for 89 years, and we provide temporary and modular accommodation either on a permanent or a temporary basis. We have our own roadmap to net zero for 2040. We started this in 2020. And we look at it on two aspects. We've got 42 premises that we operate out of, a mixture of offices, factories, depots, and we're looking to get those as individual, as our business operations, down to net zero. But also we manufacture and distribute modules, cabins for hire. We've got 35,000 cabins or modules on our hire fleet. And what we're looking at hard then is developing those products so that the products that we hire or sell to people will also be able to be operationally net zero for those clients and ultimately the events that you're involved in.
Hi, I'm Zoe from Emirates Old Trafford. So my role is Business Development Manager, so primarily I look after non-match day events, so conferences, exhibitions. We've also got a 250 bedroom hotel on site as well, but we are a cricket ground, so April to September we are a cricket ground. We also host during those months concerts for up to 55,000 people, so I guess it's moving forward for us. We've been at the ground since 1864 at the same site, so I think it's important to realise that every business is completely different on their sustainability journey, and some parts of the business are going to be harder to develop than others. But as a club, what we did at the start of last year was we created a sustainability working group. So it's not just up to one person to have that responsibility to be able to drive the change. It needs to be embedded into every department. So there's someone there from each department that goes to those meetings on a regular basis, feedback to the group on what we want to do within our different roles, and then feedback to our own individual teams about what's going on, what we're trying to do, where we're heading for that. So yeah, taken on that journey, and we're just trying to do that with a collaborative approach, looking at different accreditations and things like that, and what we can do for different types of events that we host, because each one of those, whether you've got a conference for 500 people or you've got a concert for 55,000, that sustainability thing looks different for each type of event. So it's really focusing on the different types as well.
Okay, thank you guys. So you can see we've got quite a cross-section already from people that are a well-developed roadmap to net zero. Two others with acknowledging that there's work to do. So just thinking more about that, when I work with companies, individuals, but also think about sustainability agenda on a wider basis, often think about the motivational psychology analysis, the carrot and the stick. But whose responsibility is it? Should we be mandated to drive sustainability roadmaps, or should we be doing it off our own back? So I want to work the way through you guys again, and just thinking about the responsibilities. Whose role do you think it is to drive the sustainability agenda and to drive and create sustainability roadmaps? Do you see that as a client responsibility, or do you see it as a supply chain sort of a bottom-up approach? Zoe, are you okay? We'll start again on you.
I think it's everyone's responsibility, because we as a club have our sustainability policy, we have visions of where we want to get to, but then each client, so like if you get an event inquiry, that organiser then has their own agenda on it. So some people that we speak to, it'll literally just be a tick box, like, oh, can you send over your policy? Yeah, that's fine, we'll send it over. But then there's other organisers where it's, do you have renewable energy? Do you have like zero waste? And we have to sign up to their terms and conditions. And then there's also all the suppliers that we have. So again, it's like looking at concerts. Obviously, we have the promoter that comes in and builds the staging, and we've got food suppliers. And so I think it is a responsibility of everyone, and I think it does need to be monitored, because it is everyone's responsibility, and we need to be there to learn off each other. So it's not just, this is what we're doing, look at us. Like, we need to be doing the right thing and all working together to make sure all our visions and our values align, and then moving forward as well, we need to be able to grow on that.
Okay, cool, good, thank you. Andy?
I think there's two parts to it for us, because as a group we're heavily involved in construction as well as events, and we're mandated in the construction side under Planning Policy Notice 0621 to provide a carbon sort of management plan. So that side of our business, which is looking at what we're doing as an operational estate. But what we're not mandated to do is to develop and provide better products for the likes of yourselves at events. So we're doing that really. There's no mandate to do that. There's no legislation to do that. So we've taken it on board to develop our product, to provide products that work more sustainable for yourselves. So it works in two aspects for our business.
Well, it is clearly, the responsibility for everybody. But when you are Silverstone, when you are the guardian of, British motorsports, you need to lead the way. You need to make sure that you start setting up the standards that can then, be implemented by everybody within the motorsports industry. We are probably, the biggest Grand Prix in terms of attendance. We are one of the iconic racetrack, around the world. So we've got that responsibility to really raise the bar. But this is a question of making sure that we do that collaboratively. Because even though, we decided, to be there, are we sure that all our different stakeholders, all the supply chain that we use, on a day-to-day basis is capable of delivering, those standards. So it's all about, communication, it's all about education, and it's all about setting up together, all right, the different parameters or milestones that you want to reach. But I think we need to be very ambitious. I think we need to push further, harder, and we all know that climate change is a reality. We all talk about, 2050. But we need to get that better and quicker. So this is our responsibility to make sure that we accelerate change.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, we'll come on to timelines again in a minute. But David, you want to answer that one as well?
Yeah, I think it's been said, isn't it? It is everybody. Like health and safety, and who's responsible for health and safety is everybody. Who's responsible for sustainability? To get it to work, it has to be from the very beginning right through to the very end of the chain. I would also agree with Stefan that larger organisations, whether it be suppliers or end users, perhaps do take on or should take on a slightly big responsibility. You know, perhaps you could argue that GL sponsoring this stand is us stepping up more than a smaller company could afford to do, to help promote the fact that we need to start these conversations and start working out how to work together. So I think that's where we're at the moment. We don't know how to work together. Suppliers and end stakeholders are just not used to having this conversation. It's a language that isn't as common as you may think. We probably organise some of the biggest events in the UK, and we've worked on some global events, and we have different vocabularies with each of those suppliers to talk about sustainability. So yeah, it's got to be everybody, but it's baby steps right now, I'd say, and I think the big players do need to start to drive it, because we're the ones that probably are at the forefront.
Okay, interesting. So it seems to be fairly open acceptance at every level where we are in the supply chain of a responsibility. But also interesting, Stefan, and Old Trafford as venues, you are also feeling a responsibility to drive and facilitate the ability to, you know, the lower supply chain, if you like, to come up and join us. Okay, cool. So you touched on it, David, talking about communication. But across the panel again, I'm going to start at this end with Zoe. But tell us about the kind of conversations you're getting with buyers, events coming into your venue.
Yeah, I think it's varied, to be honest. So as I was saying before, it's some people it is a tick box, it feels, and I think we're at the point now where, like when I started at the club 6 years ago, no one really asked for the policy, and to see what we was doing, and to see like the social impact and things that we did for the community as well. Like no one asked for any of that, but now those conversations are definitely coming up, and we're not at the moment losing any business based on our policy. People aren't really digging into it that much. They do just want to see it. But I feel that, I know probably we'll touch on this a little bit later on, is that moving forward we're going to see that people do choose venues and choose suppliers based on their policies. So yeah, I think it's really important, obviously, to do as much as we can, really.
Can I jump? We've talked about the responsibility. I think it's very important to talk about the opportunity. All right, sustainability is an opportunity in different reasons. One, obviously, cost, reduction, cost control. During the energy crisis, we've made some calculation, and then we realized that in the coming 25 years, our energy bills, electricity bills will be, do you have an idea how much electricity we're going to pay in the coming 25 years at Silverstone? £100 million. Woo! So when you think about those 100 million pounds, and you think, what can we do to maybe reduce, that? So can we be more efficient? So then there is an opportunity here, to make sure that, all right, reducing costs, maybe we need to modernize our infrastructure, but actually there is an opportunity to then dedicate that money that would be obviously dedicated to pay bills, to something else. And then opportunity, because over the last few years, when we got, some buyers telling us, oh, do you have 100% green electricity powering your site? Do you have, solar panels on site? Do you have EV chargers on site? Well, actually, we don't. Well, I'm sorry, but we won't organize our event in your venue. So there is a competitive advantage, to embed sustainability in everything that you do from an infrastructure point of view, because we know that it will attract, more business to you, on top of obviously reducing cost and getting a great impact, a positive impact on the planet.
Yeah, I think it's a great point about the cost and the opportunity but you're seeing, both of you are seeing a level of mandating, if you like. You're seeing a business pressure to drive sustainability. Otherwise, you detect that people won't come to your venues.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, because we work with so many like big corporate companies, and they are like, all eyes are on them to be able to reduce their footprint. So if they're getting the pressure, then they need to be seen to be doing the right thing in the venues that they choose and the events that they go to. So yeah, it definitely has a knock-on effect.
Okay, cool. Andy, from your point of view, what sort of communication, what language are you getting from your clients in terms of sustainability?
It's interesting in that across our business, especially if I look across to our construction business, where we're hiring outside accommodation, it used to be always on price. Now we can offer all the sustainable options that go into cabins. We can offer solar, smart sockets, all the various initiatives, but they all cost more in terms of the weekly hire, and people never took them up. But what we're finding now is, because these are longer term, 1-2 year hires, and the cost of energy and other aspects that are playing on that, they're actually seeing a business return by procuring or hiring a more sustainable product. Even though it costs them more on a weekly hire, the saving they're making over that 1 to 2 year is such that they're getting a business return off it. And therefore, they're now mandating, you've got large contractors that are mandating sustainable cabins with sustainable products and initiatives in there because they see it as actually a business saving. So I think as that starts to step down from that 2-year high, 1-year high, ultimately down to events, it will move from a price to a price plus sustainable benefits, because those sustainable benefits will become commercially advantageous, either as a subjective or as a direct financial benefit. And we're seeing this in that industry, and I'm sure that's going to start applying very quickly in the events.
Very selfishly, I think sustainability came to my note during the tender for the Commonwealth Games, whenever that was, a few years ago now, when a chunk of the scoring for Commonwealth Games, I can't remember what, I think it was 5%, was allocated towards our sustainability and social welfare package that we were going to put together for the event. And we were audited on that, and it was linked to our payment schedule. So unless we achieved what we said we were going to achieve in our tender process, we were penalised through payment at the end of the day. The Foreign and Commonwealth Office recently, last month, had an open day to all suppliers to discuss their future procurement plans and strategy. And one thing that came up in that was that they are actually putting 10% of every tender they put out now is related to social wellbeing and sustainability. To give you an idea, we win some tenders by 1 or 2 points. So 10% of that total strategy is a massive impact to our business if we don't win it. So very selfishly, forget saving the planet, unless we do what we say we're going to do, we won't be even invited to tender or win those tenders, because if you take 10% of the score out your tender, you're not going to get anywhere near it. So and that's becoming more prevalent. We've just recently done another tender for a much, much smaller organisation, and a big chunk of the tender response was, again, based on sustainability and what we're currently doing and what we'll do for them as an event.
Sorry, I think it's very good that you're talking about procurement, because I think procurement is one of the key, to be able, to achieve our roadmap in terms of sustainability. If it's very clear what you want to achieve and when you want to achieve it, and you can communicate it, to the potential supplier that you end up having, this is very important. And then obviously you need to measure. You need to make sure that you track. You need to make sure that everybody, end up collectively providing those data that can give you, obviously, the right metrics to understand, are you reaching, the goals? So we've tried at Silverstone, this year to do, for our first, well, we've been doing our carbon footprint measurement for the last couple of years, but we've decided, this year to use a platform called Experience with a Z, trying to invite all our suppliers to use that digital platform to share with us all the different data related to their activity with us, in order to harmonize that calculation, and I'm sure that we can maybe talk about it. It's always, a bit complicated, every organizations or venue have their own, methodology, and it's a bit of a nightmare, but, we're trying at Silverstone, to use one consistently all across, our events, and hopefully it will help.
I think, just to pick up on that point really quickly, all what Stefan's just said comes at a cost to my business. So I have to, when tendering for something, we might get into commercials later, but when tendering for something now, as a supplier, when I tender for something, if I know that end user, that key stakeholder, that major event has a focus on sustainability, I will put some budget aside to fulfill that requirement. The capture of data and what the difference is between what Stefan might want compared to Cheltenham, compared to Ascot, compared to UCRP in Glasgow last month, or the information that each stakeholder requires is different. So I can't create a piece of software in my office to deliver a level of, not yet I can't, we want to get to that, and we've actually started that roadmap to do exactly that. GL are actually trying to do a carbon grabbing for every event that we deliver. That's our goal for the next 2 years. We're trying to work out exactly the carbon footprint of every single thing we bring. But that's a big job. That's a full-time job. It's probably costing me 200 grand a year to just develop that product. So, although Stefan's dead right, getting that information from a supplier perspective, and I'm sure Wernix will say the same, customers are asking for it in so many different ways. It's a full-time job. It's a 60 grand salary for me to pay someone to work out all that. So who's paying for that? You guys are at your events. because I'm not paying for it, because my money's the money you give me to do your events. So it's a big circle of money. So actually, who pays for it is eventually the ticket price holder.
Well, sorry again. I think this is where we need to work together collectively, and probably the leaders of the industry to maybe agree in between Ascot, Wimbledon, Glastonbury, on what are the metrics that we should collectively measure. In order to make sure that we share all that with all the different suppliers, with all the supply chain, to make sure that there is that harmony in between all of us. It's not easy. We're working on it. We're part of many different groups that we're trying to contribute, and hopefully, if we want to make it a success, to reach net zero by 2030, 2040, 2050, we need to make sure the whole industry goes into the same direction.
Okay, you guys have half answered my next question, but I just wanted to drop back onto the previous point about cost and opportunity. You clearly identified, Stefan, that yes, there can be a cost, but clearly can be an opportunity. And I just wanted to ask the audience, anybody got any examples specifically? Is there a feeling that sustainability is a cost, it's a huge cost to a business? Or can anyone give us an example of where it's become an opportunity and actually develop a natural progression of your business? Who is feeling like they're having to invest heavily in sustainability at the moment? Is there a heavy cost? It's not costing anybody anything? Okay, here we go. Yeah, great. Thank you.
I can provide an example which is not from the business that I work for, but one thing that I've noticed is the merchandise, for example. It tends to be today that merchandise providers, resellers, kind of, if they can't provide sustainable merchandise, they're losing business big time, to the point where a lot of them, most of them, have now updated and upgraded their offer to exclusively sustainable merchandise. Otherwise, they're out of business. I think that's where we can see it in our industry, in events. That's where we can see it happening the fastest. And I think that comes from also the awareness and the pressure coming from the visitors, the attendees, because they are becoming more and more aware of the impact of plastic, of too much paper, not being certified paper, and such and such. So that has driven the rest of the chain to become more conscious, more aware, and be able to provide that, to support that demand from the end customer.
Thank you. Thanks for contributing. That's great.
I think, this is clear what you've just said. If we don't become sustainable, we'll disappear. Most of the, players in the industry will get out, and lose the business. So there is no choice. The question is, how do we all get there, without obviously harming, most of us, and making sure that we can all survive and go through the change together. But yeah, it's key. We need to change.
Okay, good. Going back to the points that you guys started on, then the challenges around data and data management. If I come to you, Andy, from the pure supply chain sort of background, if you like, what challenges are you getting? What are you seeing as people asking you around data? What data is being required of you?
I think our biggest challenge is, as was discussed earlier, it's everyone asking for different data and that level of information. Predominantly, we're looking at embodied carbon of products that are being delivered. We're looking at transport and logistical delivery of units. So that's mileage, travel, fuel, etc., etc. This is all data we can provide. But one of the key things that we have is, as was said, everyone asks for it in a different format. And as David said, it's the cost then of putting it together. Even again, across other sides of our business where we're on frameworks, national frameworks to provide buildings, and we've done all this information up front, we then get a tender in, and they want different and additional data or different data than you provided to get on the framework in the first instance. The cost of providing data is exceptionally high from a management and a time perspective. And I think it would be nice to have some sort of common methodology, whether it be a sort of a national metric that's done and then everyone feeds into it. But it's not just the event business. This is pure sort of construction, education, health, every sector we operate in. The request for data is so variable. It's just it's a waste of time and effort and money, unfortunately.
Interesting, yeah, waste of time and money, and certainly from my perspective, working with a lot of people across the industry, to some extent, I think there is a pain barrier we're going to have to go through, because we are all still finding our feet with this. We do need to measure. If we're going to track and show any downward trends and get to net zero, we do need to measure. And you're right, there is no one set of rules at the moment. But you guys chip in. I do see some kind of ground rules starting to be set, certainly from an exhibition-related point of view. We've got net zero carbon events starting to create some kind of central focus. We've got the guys at ILA, we've got ESA as well. You guys touched on, like Zoe, from your side, is that basis? Are they starting to, from the sport perspective, demanding data?
So from the sport perspective, we're a member of BASIS, so they do that. But then I think what's difficult for us is, because we do conference and events, and then there's like the Meetings Industry Association, and then there's BEAM, and then they've got their own accreditations, and then there's BASIS that they provide support as well. So I think sometimes for businesses that work in so many different we're all events, but they're so different, whether they're sports or conferences, it becomes quite tricky, because you're like, oh, which one do we choose? And then there's ILA, and then there's different ones, and it becomes like there's so many out there. You just want to, it's the education, I think, that comes with it as well. And then there's the measurement. So say we've got next year we've got Green Day. So people a fan that's coming to see Green Day probably isn't going to be as bothered about their carbon emission as eBay, who's got their conference in a couple of months for 500 people. So they're going to be more bothered about their measurements over someone who's coming for just for a concert. So I think that's what's difficult as well, is that we have so many different types of people that come into our business, and they all do expect different things, as what we've said before, and it's how we measure each of one of those, because they're all so different.
Fantastic choice of band name. I'm hoping Green Day are actually collecting data in the right way. Okay, I think we're sort of drawing towards an end, and I'm conscious we could keep the various discussion lines going. I'm going to move straight to a sort of a big, very loaded question. Where do you see the events of the future in 50 years' time? Net zero 2050, will we get there? What will an event look like at Silverstone? Start with you.
Well, obviously for us is not easy, because 99% of our scope emissions are scope 3, and 80% of those 99% during the F1 Grand Prix is fan travel related. And we are where we are. Silverstone, no train station, no tube station, and we've got, 50,000 cars, maybe coming, at Silverstone for the Grand Prix. So actually, that carbon footprint comparing to the 20 cars going around on the track, you can imagine the differences. So, for us in 2050, what we need to make sure that we try to do is convert all our events into a festival, and having people staying on site almost the entire time of the event, rather than having up to 150, 160,000 people coming back and forth every day. We need to have those people staying on site during the 4 days. So at least they come only once, and hopefully we can organize shuttle buses, encourage people, to carpool or maybe use an electric car. But for us, key will be having them staying on site. And if they stay on site, obviously they also consume more on site. So it increases the revenue, and it reduces, the carbon footprint.
Opportunity again. Okay, good. Andy, how does it look for you in the future for Wernick Cabins?
I think personally, like Stefan just said there, events will turn into a festival. And if I look at it me personally, I would tend to go to visit something more where there was a lot going on, or it was over multiple days. The cost of travel and the impact of travel that's going to happen in the next sort of 20 years will be such that you'll go to an event, and if it is a festival, it's got sport or it's got music, and you're staying over, there's food. It becomes a social event, it becomes a social weekend. And I think that's how to make events more sustainable, is to bring more into one thing and not just have it for you go to watch the football for 2 hours. It's the same, I live in South Wales, and they have Judgment Day at the end of the rugby union season, where there's 3 matches in Cardiff all on one day, because it gets people to come and see a bigger event rather than just going to watch one match. And that's where I think certainly from TV perspective, I think people will stop going to smaller events, but they will continue to go to bigger multi-day events with much more wider offering. And that's how I think we'll actually make them much more sustainable and net zero, because there's more rolled into one.
Interesting. Bigger, not less, but possibly some smaller events. Zoe, how do you think it'll work out for you guys?
I think the concern for, obviously, I look after the non-match day stuff, so anything that's conference and events, I feel like it's a concern that they will then go virtual, because people will be concerned about their travel, their emissions if they're travelling. So I'm based up in Manchester. But if people are travelling from all over the country, if then a company is putting pressure on people not to travel, is it then better to do virtual? I think coming out of the pandemic, obviously, I think we all got sick of virtual events and we all just wanted to meet face to face. So I think because of that, it might take a little bit longer to get there, but potentially in the future, it could be that majority of events are virtual if they can be, and then people will still obviously come to like the cricket hopefully and things like that, because as Andy was saying before, it's that experience, it's that day out, it's that socialising. You don't really pay attention to the cricket, it's just having the atmosphere and being out. So I think again it depends. But yeah, a concern for me, well, obviously, in terms of the environment, obviously, it would be better if things were virtual, but as an events venue that for 12 months of the year we operate in that way, obviously it is a concern that how it could look potentially.
Interesting. There's a whole another day's discussion about hybrid events, but we'll come to that another day.
Definitely don't want to go there.
David, do you want to finish off? How do you see GL events for attending events, delivering events in the future?
So UCI Championships in Glasgow this summer was one of the first major championships that put a load of disciplines together, very much like Olympics, but just for cycling. And the impact of that was it got bigger media, bigger footfall, or greater media, greater football, and cheaper to deliver. So having all those different cycling events, and to give some history, UCI would normally have 5 different world championships, whether that be road race, women's, road race, men's, whatever it might be. There's multiple championships they would have all around the globe. They chose to do them all in one place, all at one time in Glasgow. So it made it a bigger, more focused event. So you are right, actually. Making it a bigger event over a shorter time, encouraging people not to travel there and back all the time, is a smaller carbon footprint than having it spread around the UK and around the world. I do question why things like FIFA and Olympics and Commonwealth Games in what was going to be in Australia, while they're spreading the event over Manchester, London and whatever, I still can't see. That's a financial thing. It's got to be terrible for carbon footprint to do that, in my view. But anyway, that's financial probably. So yeah, I see events actually getting more complex and bigger to attract people to stay there later and longer. That's what I would say is going to happen.
Okay, interesting. Another whole days of discussion that opened up there potentially. So just winding up really, what role does the supply chain hold in sustainability roadmaps? Clearly there's the word collaboration was mentioned a few times. We all need to feed into that, so it's not one individual supply sector's responsibility. We all need to collaborate. And also encouragingly, clearly we do see events carrying on in the future, but absolutely accepting there may have to be some kind of change in the modus operandi. So, okay, any other final thoughts? But I think our time is up. Thank you very much.